Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're going to be taking a look. I'm going to have to go down and get this. Oh god, this. Or more specifically, these. Yes, these are both the DUOONE OLED. I'm going to have to put one of them down. These are both the DUOONE OLED. This is the Fold, and this is the Span. And if you hadn't worked it out, these are monitors, or rather, each one is 2 monitors. You may well rightly be thinking, Alex, why are you looking at these monitors? Are these even remotely relevant to the Switch? Well, that's a fair question. Let me take you through it. We were offered these. We get a lot of offers for bits and pieces like this, and usually we just, turn them down. But this time, all of their marketing material was plastered with a Switch everywhere. And not every single image, and it's not every single use case, but it's all over the place. I would say a good 40 to 50% of the promotional images that aren't AI. Seriously, the first image that you see when you go on their website is one of the most grotesque AI images I've ever seen. So many of these images have the Switch in them, just everywhere. People using the Switch and using them in various different modes because this thing can open up and it bends over and stuff like that. And the whole idea is you got one player on that side, one player on that side. Isn't that cool? Well, I'll talk about functionality a little bit more in a moment, as well as the other obvious reason why we accepted, but for the time being, I'd like to talk more about specs and then things I like, and then we'll get onto functionality. Spoiler. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. First things first, I'm going to be talking about these pretty much interchangeably. This is the Span, the other's the Fold. If there's anything specific about either one of them, I will make it clear. Don't worry. These are a pair of 1080p OLED panels, and I have to say, the panels are actually really nice. They're a little bit difficult to film as well before you calibrate them. I did calibrate them eventually, but quite a lot of the shots that you're going to see are uncalibrated. Sorry, saturation was way too high. Why would you ever even have that as an option? But now that they're calibrated, they are really, really nice. OLED obviously has the huge advantage of massive inky blacks, and it really shows. Really lovely contrast. I did have to do the calibration by eye, so it's by no means perfect, but I think it's reasonably good. Reasonably good for me. Oh, and the calibration was all done in panel, so it's a bit fiddly, but it works. Both panels have the same ports and controls. You've got a power USB-C, you've got a display USB-C, and I'm not sure it makes a huge difference, but maybe it does. I'm certain at some point I was able to put display through the power port. And then you've got mini HDMI, one for the top screen and one for the bottom screen. I hate mini HDMI. It's a tough, difficult to use plug and port. The pins are tiny. It's prone to damage. It's just a bad port. I do not like mini HDMI, but it's thin and stuff, isn't it? They've got speakers in them as well, but honestly, they are nothing to write home about. They sound reedy and, well, like they're coming out of something that thin. So they're each a pair of monitors. Well done, Alex. What about Switch functionality? Well, I'm getting to that. Wait a minute. To use these with a Switch, you don't need a dock. You just need one USB-C to C cable to plug it into your Switch, and then another going to a power supply that's suitable for the Switch and the screens at the same time. And you could use a power bank. I used a big one. I'm not suggesting this is the way it's supposed to be used. And then the screens will route the power back to the Switch and kind of presumably trick it into going into docked mode. We've seen this kind of thing before. It's not exactly new. I don't like how it connects, though, to be brutally honest. The way that the Switch responds to it isn't fully reassuring. It comes up saying it's charging, and then it's not, and then sometimes it's charging again, then the screen disappears and it appears as you would expect. But yeah, it's not ideal. I'm sure it is fine, but it does me a wobble. It would have been nice if it was a single cable solution, but there's no reasonable way of doing that, not unless the screens themselves have a battery, which they don't. But their marketing doesn't make this functionality especially clear. I understand there's always going to be a little bit of artistic license when it comes to showing off a product, but they often show just no cables coming out of the screen, which immediately, for anyone savvy, is going to be a red flag. But you might sort of think, oh, okay, well, you need one cable, but you don't. You need 2, and it's not the end of the world, but I don't like that. I don't like that kind of slightly misleading marketing. It just comes off as a little bit wrong and, well, misleading. It's the same with a load of the other images as well. Sometimes it's showing some sort of like Monopoly game or something, and it's just not plugged into anything. And then one of them, suddenly the screen's massive and everyone's made of melting wax because it's not a real image. Just, you've got so many real images. Why is there this random AI one? It looks terrible. But whatever, let's move on. So you plug your Switch in, and suddenly it's got 2 screens. You know, you can do it where it's sort of folded over in the temp mode. I'll grab it. That's gonna be a good idea, Alex. Show the thing you're talking about. You can have it like that, so that there's one screen on either side. You could have it so that it's like that. There's a stand on the back for standing it up. Ooh, oh God, this is a really hard thing to get in shot. And it's going to be covered in fingerprints now. So whichever way you want to use it, you can use it. You can use it for multiplayer. That's what they're showing time and time again. But there is a wrinkle with that. And that's that you're going to be having the same screen as the other person, which isn't like a big deal or anything like that. But it does kind of make the whole idea of having 2 separate screens more redundant. There is an argument to be made that it's more comfortable to have your own screen rather than trying to sort of cram next to one other person, but I don't know. It doesn't strike me as a huge, like, oh, how have they never done this before? Why has no one done this before? It seems like a very niche application, and that goes doubly so for the span. Because the span, I mean, you just have to lay it down so it's flat, and you have to have the stand up like that because otherwise it blocks the ports. Fun times. It's just not a particularly engaging USP to me. It's like, hey, you can each have your own screen, but it's from the same Switch, so it still thinks there's only one screen, so it's not like you're going to be seeing your perspective like in, I don't know, Splatoon or something, and someone else has got their perspective and you're playing multiplayer. That would be magic. That's not how the Switch works. However, you can have each screen show a different input. The only downside is, if you're doing the Switch stuff, you can't do everything via USB-C anymore, and you're going to need a dock. It took a while to get it set up, but I did, and it works, definitely. I mean, it's not an ideal solution, it's not elegant by any means, and something else that was quite annoying. 2 switches plugged in. This is the moment, obviously one's via this one cable solution, which isn't one cable. The other one via a dock. This is a big moment. So there's audio on one. Hear that tick, tick, tick. I'm fully expecting. Yep, no audio from the other one. If I've got to be brutally honest, in terms of like a Switch accessory, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just 2 screens. Yeah, they're nice screens, don't get me wrong, you know, the blacks are really deep, it's an OLED panel, it's good quality panels, do not get me wrong. But it's just, as an accessory for the Switch, it's just not making any sense to me. Maybe there are some niche Switch applications that I'm not familiar with, where it would really benefit for some reason, but I've got to be brutally honest, I don't see it. I mean, the Switch already has a screen, and if you've got an OLED, it's already got an OLED screen. Yeah, it's a lot smaller, but you know, it's there. You don't have to spend the asking price for this thing. And it's an asking price. We'll get onto that. But, to be fair, there are plenty of other applications. At the end of the day, these are just displays. You can use them to display anything that's compatible. And with that mini HDMI, pretty much anything's compatible. But I mostly used it for PC stuff, because that's USB-C and a lot easier. Their marketing doesn't really show it, but this is really, I think, best. Both of these, although definitely the Fold is, I think, better than the Span, because, I mean, well, the Fold folds down. But I think these are actually really useful as productivity devices, you know? Basically portable screens. If you've got a compatible system, laptop, or whatever, you can just plug this in one cable, and suddenly, instead of just one screen, you've got 3. Sort of. But they don't mention any of that in their marketing. They do mention a book mode. Shut up, Mom, I'm reading Doom Eternal! But productivity is easily, I think, the best way to use these devices. And so, you get to utilize even more of the features, because there's loads of different modes here. There's one where you mirror your main display. There's one where you have extensions, so it comes across as 2 additional separate screens. There's one where it comes across as 1 additional screen. It's really tall, and that's the one I've used the most, because the one I mentioned before that, where it's 2 separate screens, has never worked for me. I got in touch with the company who sent them over and who make them, and they said, have you tried plugging the screens into an external power supply as well? And they did provide power supplies. 15-watt tiny things, US plug, useless to me. But I've got plenty of other power supplies. So I thought, okay, yeah, fair enough. And then I read a little bit further into the email, and they said, or try not plugging it into an external power source, because it can, like, route the power to the device that you're plugging it into, like the laptop or whatever. And so as far as I can tell, they don't know why it's not working. I've tried everything. I've tried plugging it into a USB-A power supply so that there's no sort of way that it can possibly backfeed or anything like that. I've tried everything. I have never once got the expansion mode to work. But the weird thing is, Windows sees the monitors there. It knows they're there. And it's like, yeah, you've got 3 monitors, but there aren't. It just says no signal on the other 2 in the bluest screen I've ever seen. So annoyingly, one of the modes just doesn't work. Great. These are pre-production units. It might be a hardware thing. It might be a software thing. Maybe some firmware can update it or something like that. But either way, I've tried every which way. I've tried multiple devices. I cannot get this function to work. And that, for me, was one of the most interesting use cases, to have 2 separate screens. You can full screen them. You can have, like, game on one thing. And yeah, you can do that with Windows. You can just, like, stretch them to kind of fit. And you can use, like, power toys and stuff like that. I know about all that stuff. And so it does work. But it's not... The fact is that this offers something that doesn't work, and that's a bad thing. Moreover, the ones that do work, the Sequence, where it's just like one big screen, yeah, it works. Most of the time, sometimes you'll plug it in and it's just like, hey, yeah, this screen is 30 hertz, and it's 720p, and it's 2 screens. It's just, what? No, and when I say 2 screens, it's not expanding. It's the same screen twice. I've run into so many issues getting these screens to just play ball. And it could be a Windows thing. It absolutely could. Windows is, you know, running on spiders, webs, and dreams. It's, you know, it's designed to work with everything. But it's not the plug-and-play experience you want from something like this. At least it's not for me. Moreover, when you're desperately trying to get it to work, you have to use these little controls here, which are horrible. You've got 2 buttons here, one for each of the screens on each unit, and the buttons aren't very nice. They move around a lot. They're kind of rattly. Ugh, you can hear that. Ugh. And then beneath those, you've got a rocker for up, down, and menu, and these feel even worse. I wouldn't mind quite so much if they weren't charging so much for these. They just don't feel good. They're a nuisance to use. I mean, they work, don't get me wrong. There's nothing broken about them. They're just not premium feeling. They don't feel good. I don't want to use them. I want to move on with my life. One other thing with the span, one thing I did think would be quite useful is using it as kind of like a tabletop type thing for something like D&D, and you can move your characters around and stuff like that. Have everyone round a table, you know, I've done that sort of thing before with a big screen. And, because yeah, these are touchscreen. I didn't mention that. They're touchscreen. But the problem is the strip in the middle, which you should just about be able to see. Please tell me you can see it. This strip separates the 2 screens and the 2 digitizers, so you can't drag from one screen to the other. It just stops. It's really annoying. Getting on their website, they're showing all these touchscreen games like a chessboard. You wouldn't be able to move between the 2 things. But alright, we've dallied long enough. You know what this looks like. Clamshell design, 2 screens. Have I tried to play DS games on this? Of course I have. I can't deny it was a bit of a nuisance to get everything set up to my liking, but once I did, and even then, it's not 100% the way there, but when I did, oh lordy. This is so unbelievably cursed. This might be the most fun I've had playing a DS game since the DS came out. It is 100% unfiltered novelty. There is no need to ever play a DS game like this on something this size. But you know what? It's fun to play DS games on something this size. I'm not going to bleat on about it loads and loads, but suffice it to say, it's an incredible novelty. It's really good fun. It's such a bizarre experience to see these games running so big and having that sort of like equal distribution and everything between the screens. It's bizarre, it's kind of wonderful, but it is just playing Project Rub on a big screen. But the question isn't, do you want to play DS games like this? Because I think anyone who's got a vague interest would love to give it a go. The question is, do you want to pay the price. Slightly more ominous than I anticipated. These are going up on Kickstarter, and at the time of recording, that is not live yet. However, I've been allowed access to the preview page, so I can see how much they're charging for it. And this may be subject to change. This information isn't out there in public. This is just what I've got access to. If you are a super early bird, you can get one of these, a DUOONE OLED span, for a mere $557. And it gets worse. The Fold, arguably the more useful of the two devices, I would say, certainly the easier to transport, more robust, just better. $597. And these are the super early bird prices. Those prices, I think, are almost guaranteed to go up. In fact, they've got an early bird price here, $614 for the span, $659 for the Fold. That's not cheap. Don't get me wrong, the panels are great, and the build quality actually feels pretty damn good, apart from the buttons. They feel rubbish. And there are similar devices out there that cost as much, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. It doesn't feel out of the ordinary to charge this much for something like this. It's just, I don't know whether anything like this is worth that kind of money. Maybe it is to you. Maybe you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh my god, I'd pay anything for something like that. In which case, great. Just, you know, bear in mind some of the functions don't work. But for the Switch especially, I can't think of any really solid reason to get this. Especially considering the Switch 2, it might not work with it, at least not with a 2-cable solution. And it being just around the corner, I don't know. Maybe they can do something in an update? Maybe. I think for me, these are a fun idea in theory when you hear about them, but then when you actually get them in your hands, it's like, okay, I don't really know what I'm gonna do with these. Besides productivity, I can see that being a real boon, but for the Switch especially, I can't recommend it. But maybe that's just me. Maybe you're looking at this thing and going, ooh, lordy boy, I want me one of those, in which case you can find out more by checking the link in the description. But please do take what I've said to heart. I'm not sure that for the Switch, this is worth your time. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you unfold that subscribe button? That is the best I've got. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye. Why don't you read about that subscribe button? That's rubbish, isn't it? Not sure I've got anything better.
Break time.
Oh, I think my throat just tried to escape out of my mouth.